This section is on altered states and the religious use of drugs. Altered states may be defined as mental experiences that transcend ordinary experiences. How do people enter altered states of consciousness? This is brought about by numerous factors. It can be physiological, psychological, or pharmaceutical means that individuals will enter an altered state of consciousness. One way in which people enter an altered state of consciousness is through meditation and trance. We know, and we'll talk about the unitary state in just a few minutes, but there are many people who meditate and reach the point where they feel themselves to be one with all things and with all people. And this is often referred to as unitary state. And it's something that many people who become proficient at meditating often experience. Also trance. In a trance state, people can enter a trance through various techniques and again experience things that are out of the ordinary, and it is considered an altered state of consciousness. Another way in which people achieve altered states of consciousness is through sensory deprivation and overload. This picture features the whirling dervishes of Sufism, which is the esoteric or mystical side of Islam. And these whirling dervishes, they dance and they begin to spin or whirl around in place and oftentimes in a circle with one another. And as the intensity of the music and their movement increases, they will overload the sensory system and again achieve an altered state of consciousness. It's a very beautiful thing to watch, and the practitioners of this form of altered state of consciousness or this ritual will share how meaningful it is for them. There are things that are done by individuals to achieve a change in body chemistry, very much like with sensory overload here with the Native American sun dance, as they continue to expose themselves to the elements and to continue to push the body chemistry changes. We know that there are many chemicals that are in our body that in response to various activities and various things will create sensations and feelings and other things within us. There's also the use of drugs that will cause persons to enter into an altered state of consciousness. These are very often drugs or herbs and plants, things that have been around for a very long time, and there's a great deal of knowledge about how to use them, when to use them, and we'll describe that more in detail. Sacred pain is another way in which many people enter an altered state of consciousness. There will be things that individuals do in the name of religion, in the name of achieving an altered state, a unitary state, that it inflicts pain upon the body, whether it is self-flagellation or other things that are practiced by individuals that bring about a sense of pain, but that pain seen as being liberating, that pain is seen as transformative. There are also some biological ways in which people experience altered states. For example, through auras and migraines that are associated with migraines. There have been people who have examined the accounts of people in history who have reported visions and other things that have taken on a religious sense and a religious nature. And people looking at it from a biomedical perspective will very often say, well, what was happening? This person was suffering from migraines and experiencing the auras that are very often associated with it. But again, we will talk about how culture can influence how we see those things. And while for some people it's simply an aura associated with migraines, for other people it's communication with the divine, a connection with the divine. Those auras mean something important and are viewed in a different light. The overstimulation of the sympathetic system with music and dance and other ways of really kind of overwhelming our bodies is very much like sensory overload, but things that are done to bring us into a state of consciousness where we feel disassociated in many ways from our body and being very much caught up in the moment. Religious interpretations of altered states of consciousness that people enter into. The first is spirit possession. We've, in previous session, talked about spirit possession, but very often a person, again, feeling their bodies being overtaken by a spirit or an entity or a deity, and that's how that particular, in many cultures, is interpreted. Also, a trance state. People enter into a trance state and can undergo certain physical feats or have certain experiences very much out of the ordinary. With altered states used in healing, that oftentimes it affects both the healer and the patient. The healing can be facilitated through suggestibility, emotional catharsis, and feelings of rejuvenation. The healer may use supernatural power of the spirit that possesses him or her to remove the cause of illness, but an altered state being a very important part of the healing process, both for the healer and the patient. For many people, and in many religious systems, achieving a unitary state or becoming one with the supernatural is the goal or the ideal when it comes to altered states of consciousness. It's a major component of a religious ritual, or it can be the entire religious system itself could be oriented toward a person achieving the unitary state. A common theme within these religious systems that emphasize the unitary state is that humans once had the ability to be connected to the divine, to the spirit world, to the supernatural, however we choose to term it, and somehow lost that. And so the goal of religion is to regain that unity. Let's turn now to talking about the use of drugs in religious practices. Altered states of consciousness can be achieved through hallucinogenics and other substances, and it's very, very important in some religious practices, and it differs from the way we typically think of the use of drugs. In the West, drugs are often seen as being used for either medicinal purposes or for recreational use. In non-Western cultures, the drugs are mainly used by shamans or by other religious specialists. They may give them to their patients or their followers, but usually it's the shaman or the other specialist that very often will take the drugs or the hallucinogenics to enter into that altered state to perform tasks of healing, divination, and other things. This is something that has to be stressed. A ritual setting is very, very important when it comes to the religious use of drugs. There is the context, which is the ritual. There's the set, which is the expectation. And there's the setting, which is the social and physical environment. So it's more than just a person ingesting something that alters the chemical balance or the chemical actions in the brain and in the body, but it is done within a ritual context. And there's certain expectations for what will be the outcome of this. And the setting is usually with a religious specialist and very often with other people that are part of that particular practice that join in. And this gives a person the proper way in which to interpret and to experience those things that happen. There have been situations where people have gone on quests to use drugs in other cultures that have been used down through the ages for religious purposes, and they will simply, when everything is said and done, have quote unquote a bad trip. Whereas the people who have the language, who have the expectation, who really kind of know what the process is about and are guided through this process, have cultural background in it, find it as being something to be quite meaningful. When a person has, again, the background in terms of the beliefs and their behaviors come into play with this as well, it brings a full effect when it comes to a person reaching the unitary state, an altered state of consciousness, experiencing healing or affecting healing.